fee, take us to me $11 million.
Greetings everyone, Nate the Nerdarchy here from Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, and we are talking about some magic and psionics and how that all works out in the world of your D&D RPG game. And with me I have...
the Canada. Although there could be more than one. There's like a banker guy in Singapore. But anyway, yeah, Canada. Hi. So, magic, psionics. I'm kind of on the side of magic.
I'm obviously on the side of psionics.
Clearly on the side of psionics. And here's kind of the direction, because I can literally feel the nerdy brains out there brewing already with ideas. Here's kind of the direction we wanted to go in. The Canada. So here's kind of the direction we want to go in. We want to define... Nate was giving me an example earlier. Maybe this is the example you were giving me. Is that better context for this? So we were talking about this right before we got on, is the idea that if something bad happens and nobody can explain it in like a small village or something, the first thing they're going to do is be like, it was a wizard did it. People probably aren't going to instinctively go, I think we have a doppelganger or some other obscure D&D monster. They're just going to go find the wizard at the end, tie the dude up, light him on fire, and hope it doesn't happen again.
In the worst case scenario, yes. That's what it would be like. Yeah, witch hunt is done. We beat our new record. It only took 3 hours.
Maybe my town. They just all go. They're like, you know what? Let's make this easy. So the question is going to be, how do we want to deal with this? How do you control magic in these kinds of settings? Or how do you control psionics? Which, in my opinion, I think psionics are quite a bit more nefarious.
Yes, and they're spookier and leave less trails, I think.
So
I want to take this three stages. I want basically like little group to small, like townish kind of collection of people, like village, like a small village. Then we've got the town. Then we've got the city or empire. So on the small scale where you're only dealing with maybe every once in a while some kid has sorcery powers like in a generation or two, or there's a traveling wizard merchant or something like that. Or you have some, so that's like the level for village interaction, I would think. A traveling adventurer is going to come through and be like, oh, we could take care of this curse that seems to have happened, and since you've already taken care of the supposed cause of the curse and there's nothing wrong, I mean, there's still something wrong there, then I'll come in and like dispel magic or something like that.
Vicky is hitting it right on the nose for me. I am totally into the idea of magic police and magic, like as part of the army or as part of local government. I really, really, really think that's a direction I want to head in. But yeah, nobody expects. We knew that was going to happen. We knew it was going to go there. I got better. Okay, Doug. What Doug say? Doug said some things.
Yes. Well, while you're looking at that, Jandro Luna said 1700s witch hunts, as well as Psyonix, do not require spoken words or any other components, so controlling them is nearly impossible. I would say there'd have to be some way of detecting them, and then once you've detected them, through the Magic Inquisition people, then you have that ability to then control them. Once you can see who's who, and you'd probably register them or tattoo them or something, if you're oppressive. Like if you're an empire and you're like, you've got this psionic guy up at the top, or this mage guy up at the top, and he's like, I want to rule everybody, and I don't want to get assassinated by some kind of shadow blade psychic master or whatever. So basically, everybody in the kingdom that has such a power would probably be registered, is my guess. Is in like empire level, there'd be registration. Better than at the village level where they just suspect you're the one that's done the bad things. So it depends on what kind of relationship. If it's heavy magic everywhere, well, the local farm boy probably uses some kind of unseen servant to assist with stuff. So at that point, magic is not as well known, but you'd still have to have some way of saying like, well, we've got 10 evokers that we've ever seen ever. Somebody burnt down the end of the fireball explosion with some kind of explosion, and you're the one that's here. So you're looking like you're holding the smoking gun practically if you're that guy.
And that was in Twitch chat. That's Jan. You can just call her Jan.
Okay.
Jan's been here since the beginning of time. Hi, Jan. But there's several directions we can go in this as far as control is concerned, and as far as going after the player characters is concerned. Remember that if a lightning bolt strikes a tree and burns someone's, farmhouse down, depending on how much magic there is in the universe, it might be your character's fault now. Just because they saw you, I don't know, create food and water in the inn, a perfectly nice thing to do for other people. Maybe you did create food and water for some homeless that were like destitute out in the street. And now that somebody saw you cast a spell, you're the guy who burnt the farmer's farmhouse down or whatever.
Yeah, it's like if something burns down and it probably used a flamethrower, but you've got a lighter, well, you're the only one with the lighter. So you're the closest thing to what they envision as the bad person that did this that's available.
I'd also, I'm very interested in your perspective on this. Because there's so many levels of attack you can use when you're trying to like control magic. And Elfbait, I did see your comic about like magic sniffers, like the Marvel Universe. That is something we have already discussed, and definitely something we should bring up. The idea of mutant registration and stuff like that. Go ahead.
I just want to say, I think it's Ivan Live. Thanks for the hosting. And also someone is rating us. I just can't figure out how to see that. Sorry.
Oh,
I've made the thing too tiny up in the corner, so I'm like,
it's okay. That was Ian D Live. What's up, Ian? How are you doing, buddy? I love you. By the way, happy birthday. I do know it was your birthday the other day. And Smiter 1983. Smiter is one of my bromios.
oh, well, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for those of us just joining us, we are talking about magic and Psyonix and how you would deal with that sometimes in regulatory and on the different levels, like how a village group would deal with it, how you'd have like a medium-sized town deal with it, and then how you'd have like a big city or an empire deal with it.
Exactly. And I think on the village level, for me, I'm very comfortable relying on ignorance.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. If you don't have a heavy magic centered, like if you're not dealing with an Eberron or like a I don't know, Mistra. I mean, they had flying airships, so they had a high level of magic, but I don't know if the regular old farm people had magic as well in that. I'm not too familiar with that, but I would say if you're on Eberron level, pretty much people have a good understanding of what magic is, what it could do, what a person that would probably do bad things with magic is to see, so they're
educated.
Yeah, they're more educated than,
Right.
oh, a lightning bolt struck the house yesterday, and we saw some guy shooting pyrotechnics the other day with his staff, so maybe he also burnt down the farmer's house.
And I would definitely argue that in a setting like Eberron or something like that, if you're in a world where magic items are for sale, then there is at least one of the vendors is like showing off a wand shooting fireworks or some other thing. I think if you're in a setting where it's common enough, then the mystery's gone and people aren't going to react to you in the same way, versus kind of a Conan the Barbarian kind of setting where there's very rare magic, and when you see it, it's usually quite powerful. In that kind of setting, it's straight to burn the witch. I saw you create food and water. You're clearly a demon. We have to burn you now.
Burn her anyway. Thank you, Zankar, and I missed the other one.
It's okay.
Yeah.
They forgive you.
Thank you for following.
Prison magic. Try and make a prison magical. Okay, so Vicky T said, I'd love someone to try and make a prison from magic. Maybe some kind of stone that absorbs magic so that you can't use magic in prison. So here's my argument about making magic users deal with magic or psionicists deal with psionicists. It ends up being an arms race. A much more effective means of dealing with that is coming up with some form of mundane or control-based counteraction. If I'm a horrible dictator, your children took a test when they were like infants, and I knew they could use magic or psionics, and I took them as soon as I figured that out. So the question is, what kind of, or Doug Vahovic, which is just have beholder guards everywhere.
There you go. Problem solved.
So I don't know. Which direction do you think you would go in for? Hey, old Grumpy. How you doing, buddy? Which direction do you think you would go in for controlling it? Would you try and match the arms race, or do you disagree with the arms race? Or
I think there's naturally going to be some kind of arms race. If magic, basically, if it's kind of like if there's enough people to bring to the gunfight, then the gunfight happens. You know, like Wild West style. So if you've got a group of people that all are magically or psionically inclined, you're going to have this issue where they start to use that. They could use that power and become bandits and be very intractable group of bandits without some kind of counter to them. So it's almost like you'd have to, on large scale, you'd have some kind of magical investigators or magic police. And even if they were just empire-based and they went around and solved the really bad problems, like an adventuring group, but specifically designed to deal with not bandits, which you can just throw a whole bunch of mercenaries at, but the really difficult to deal with people that are launching fireballs when a group of adventurers show up to deal with them, and they're gone and they're toast, and then they become zombies or skeletons or something. You're like, okay, send in the magical people. We got to deal with this.
As an aside, I saw a few comments come up in YouTube. I would say we're probably going with like standard. We usually try and attack these from standard issue D&D level of magic.
Yeah, like mid realm, not heading towards Lord of the Rings style where the wizards use swords because, well, it's the best thing they've got most of the time, and not like the Eberron high magic, high psionics, everything like
right.
You know, with earth elemental moving trailers and wagons and stuff. So the in between where you've got a decent amount of wizards, sorcerers, and warlocks and things, but they're one of the 12 classes, not one of the most highlighted classes in that. And if you add in Psyonix, you've got like the 13th.
Now, the Psyonix, I'm glad you bring it up because we haven't really been touching on it, and we need to touch on it. We've realized that these short 2-hour streams, we're like fighting to cram everything we want to talk about into it. So yeah, exactly. Like shoehorning things in. Like the other day, we like stuffed something in at the end and didn't really get to address it. So I want to keep Psyonix in this conversation.
Good,
because
I will do that.
Well, the big thing is that it's much harder to come up with blanket solutions. Raven brought up a really awesome point about a very old school, but kind of, to me, a very romantic notion that iron just nullifies magic. You're holding a piece of iron, whatever, you just can't use magic now. But those kind of blanket solutions are much harder to implement when we're looking for how do you deal with magic and psionics. If you're a government, your military force just got incredibly complicated. So how are we dealing with the difference between psionics and magic?
Okay. I know 5e looks like they're going to go in the direction that psionics and magic just kind of like pass each other in the night. They don't really interact much. Mm-hmm. I find that frustrating because it's great as a DM, and you're like, oh, your Dispel Magic doesn't work on my power. Isn't that convenient? But as a player character interacting with the world, it's like, nope, that doesn't work with this. Nope, that doesn't work with this. I would much rather have it where Psyonix is just simply a different way in going into magic, similar to how Divine Magic in 5e, I mean, you could practically take out the deity out of it, really, and just say, well, I'm Divine Magic. It's just a different type of spellcaster from a particular school of thought or understanding. So I would go with more of the they can dispel each other, they can manipulate each other. An anti-magic shell is going to interact with psionics, that kind of thing.
I will say this, I am incredibly comfortable with the idea that psionics is essentially, and correct me if I misinterpret you here, psionics is essentially magic, arcane energies, but it's the discipline of the mind rather than physically manipulating them. So it would be the difference between someone who spends their day meditating and someone who spends their day doing Tai Chi. The wizard does...
Air with KBS/S at 0. Oh, I'm reconnected.
There you go. Yeah. You were completely disconnected. Yeah. Coming back. There we go. Coming back.
Sorry, I got the red square of doom in the corner of OBS there saying bad things happened.
It basically said that he was no longer connected to the internet, even though we were still talking to each other.
Yes. So wherever it left off, let's see. Okay, so
we're very importantly, sorry about that, guys. I apologize. We're very importantly defining how psionics and magic intersect with each other.
Okay, so my take, which I do not believe is the Wizards of the Coast 5e take, is that magic psionics are just like sorcerers, wizards, clerics, druids. It's just a fifth type of magic, you could say, if that's the way you would like to put it. And so you've got, the spontaneous spellcaster, sorcerer, who's got magic in the blood. You have the wizard who sits there and trains and studies and figures out kind of the metaphysical secrets of the universe and then uses those for fantastic effects. And then you've got the druid, who I think is more of like a nature sorcerer, who has like maybe power directly vested to them by nature. And then I feel like the cleric, you've got that divine angle where it's either some kind of faith structure or an actual deity granting them powers. And then you've got the psionicist, who I think is more of, they have their internalized strength that like basically anybody could technically be a psionicist, just maybe not everyone's going to be as good as a psionicist as they could as like the top tier. So it's similar. It's similar to the idea. It's different from the idea that only certain people can become sorcerers, either through some kind of magical accident or by blood or whatever. But psionicist is more like anybody can attain it if they take their aptitude and apply themselves. So I would say it's internalized kind of questing through the mind and reality, but different than the way wizards would do it. Which is why I like the wisdom-based psionicist rather than intelligence.
Ranger Roy says, question, why do you think they wouldn't interact in official material?
That's not the impression I'm getting from the UAs that I've read about it.
Yeah.
So unless I've misinterpreted something, I'm not getting that from the Unearthed Arcana, nor from what I've heard Mike Merle say about it. Not that I've like been in private rooms with him, but I mean like what I've seen out in the open,
which would be awesome.
Which would be really awesome. But what I've seen out in the open, I would say, is that's not the direction I think they're going. I think they want it to be alien and different and strange, almost as if it's like a primordial power that transcends like dimension, time, and the laws of magic. That's what I got out of it. But...
Elfbait sums it up quite nicely. I think we can attack this from a lore side, which we don't have to get too heavy-handed with the lore. Really here, we need to discuss the practical implications as far as rules function so that we can then have a basis. Essentially, we're defining physics for our world. We need to say, how does magic and psionics interact with each other so we know how we can control it or deal with it. Elfbait said psionics tap into the primordial essence of magical energy that threads through the cosmos. Very, very lovely.
Thanks for the follow, Skeleton Jr.
The love.
So so I'd like to say right now, if you detect magic, detect psionics, dispelling magic, dispel psionics, like that, because they have that overlap. And just like, if you had a druid power and you used it and it was a concentration enchantment and you dispel magic, it goes away, just like all the rest of the magic. I don't want it to be separated. It's been like a thorn in my side for the second from whatever editions is the strange the strangeness in the rules. I feel like there's enough strangeness to the fluff of psionics that you don't have to make the rules screwy on top of it.
And to be totally honest, for the sake of being completely pragmatic about this, you guys could insert whatever fluff you're comfortable with as far as that's concerned, as long as mechanically, for the sake of this argument, things tie together nicely. So dispel magic, detect magic is dispel and detect psionics. So then I guess the next question comes in, since we can control these things in both hands, both factors, what are we looking at for our village? Psionicist, mage, it doesn't matter, in small, uneducated populaces.
All right, I think in small, ill-educated or ill-informed or ignorant populace, I would say that they're going to have an issue when it comes to that, something mundane could happen, like somebody gets sick, or it's the yearly flu. It just happens to be worse than normal. But hey, there's that weird guy with a staff and robes in the area, so we're concerned that he's the problem. So that desire, almost like lazy desire or mistrust of outsiders. And you don't want to trust every stranger that comes up to you. Don't take candy. Stuff like that. But at the same time, it just seems to be that trope that if you're, a wizard or scion or some kind of, hey, you could be in some places, if they're really hostile towards you could be like an herbalist healer, and they're going to get on your case because somebody got the fever sickness or fever dreams or something. You're like, hey, I just got here. And that takes at least 2 weeks to happen. So this is the second week for that. And you're like, oh, you know how it works. Obviously, you must be the problem. That kind of, you wouldn't know about it if you were a good, upstanding, wholesome citizen.
Absolutely. And Axanar brings up a really interesting point we can attack here. Axanar, I believe you're quoting Highlander. You've the devil in you, MacLeod. When he gets back up and or maybe that was MacLeod. I don't remember. Anyway, the idea that you could have a wizard wander through town, or psionicist, nobody's ever seen anything like this before. You decide that you're going to help a sickly individual. Maybe a woman gave birth and the birth is taking her life. So you go in and very compassionately cast a healing spell on her and save her. Now this woman you've just saved is shunned by the village and just kicked out of town with no food, no water, nothing. Maybe they burned her house down. Maybe they did something horrible to the child. But you have to remember, these reactions would be very customary for people that had no experience with magic or anything like that. Everything that happens to them, it was at Highlander. Okay, I couldn't remember. These kinds of reactions would be extreme and terrifying. And so there would be like unless you, because I feel like the closer we get to the dealing with large cities and stuff like that, the more that's going to trickle down into other areas.
I would agree. It's gonna have to be, I think, more controlled in, but they're also going to be more open to certain things. And that's just like, it's basically like your lived experience someplace and what your parameters of understanding are. Like, you know how cows work, you know how the farm works for the most part. You know how a lot of stuff works that you deal with on a daily basis. But when you're exposed to something that you don't understand completely, it's kind of like the whole wild world is available to you don't have parameters for what you're seeing. So when you see someone get magically healed, or when you see somebody get some kind of fever sickness that you've never seen before, or it's twice as bad as it ever was, and you're like, well, I want to know what's the cause of this. A similar concept is, it's kind of off to the side, but gambling. The idea that you have like these lucky things you can do, or this activity. Well, the last time I did this specific hand wave before I pulled the lever at the slot machine, I won big. So I'm just going to keep doing that hand wave thing, and the idea to affect the outcome of the situation. And I mean, unless you truly believe in magic, that's not something that you say, oh yeah, that will definitely help with you winning something. So you've got this situation where you've got this large experience blank. You just, like, stuff comes in or comes out of it or goes into it, but you don't understand what's in there. And that's the whole entire, I'm a mage, or I'm a hedge wizard, or a sorcerer, or a Psyonix guy, like a mind magic. And you just kind of end up saying, well, I'm going to guess what's in there. And it includes evil, terrible warlock people who like to summon the dead and kill people with fever dreams and raise them as zombies. Because you've just either imagined that or heard stories, or some kid just made up a story and told you, I saw him take off his socks and conjure up a tempest. And you're like, okay, that guy's got to go. He's done. Now with Matt, that's like the where you have lower magic or medium magic, but you're off in the sticks and there's just no wizards or magic people around.
Precisely.
So as you get closer to either having a higher level of magic, or just maybe it's a village that is in between two cities, or towns, so it gets a lot of action, it gets a lot of trade. It's still like, maybe it's a lumber town or something like that, or I mean like a lumberjack village. So they might still see many interesting different people in. So they're going to be more accepting of strange stuff, because you've got traveling merchants who you respect tell you, hey, don't be some kind of crazy person off in the sticks. This guy's a healer. Don't burn him at the stake. Don't be morons. Yes. And so they might have people that they respect that are totally normal and within their paradigm that say, hey, these people are cool, just leave them be, or they do good things and don't mess with them, or you might actually make them angry enough that they want to do something bad to you. So they're informed more. So then you have less of the problems of the burning at the stake stuff.
Now, from the perspective of being informed, and I am trying to keep up with both sets of chats. I'm not looking at Facebook chat, but I am watching Twitch and YouTube right now. So I am taking a lot of comments into account right now. But from the perspective of an informed population, if we take Bob's no-name religion, right? So here's our generic religion. If we take our no-name religion and we say that these people have clerics that are capable of casting healing spells, or that druids exist out in the world that are capable of working magic that maybe that far-off community might have run into at some point, suddenly we're able to offer a slightly or a realistically higher level of education to these distant communities. So it kind of blunts the concept of ignorance for them. Maybe they would be a little bit more educated.
You have less of the strangeness and otherworldly, right. and basically you start to gain a parameter of what to expect out of this. It becomes less. You become less scared. As that village person that, oh yeah, the druid guy came in and he would heal people with herbs, and we'd trade with him, and he had a nice pet wolf that didn't eat anybody's sheep, like... Good inclusion. Yeah, that kind of stuff. We like that guy. He was awesome. Are you like that guy? And you're like, I think I am.
Exactly. James Leslie says, so more superstition, and how do we control what we don't understand? So the initial approach to this is if they have no experience with magic whatsoever. The evolution of that is to say, there's got to be clerics running around somewhere. There's got to be druids running around somewhere. They must have had interactions with this. If Nate's a priest of Bob, and I know he's hanging out at the local inn, and my wife's in labor and she's in trouble, I'm going to go bang on his door until he answers. Whether he knows magic or not, I'm probably going to assume he does and ask him to help. So, Doug Vahovic has a question. Would psionic material for 5e be better as a monastic tradition? Got the wisdom characteristic going, and then a key point mechanic in its place.
I guess if you wanted to treat it more, I guess the closest thing I would think would be the 4 elements. I guess you could go with that, and just make additional power types that with a psionic bent, like maybe psionic blast or maybe some other things. But I think you'd still be going more for the monk who knows how to fight and does all this stuff, but also knows kind of more higher level mind powers, or like they become a disciplined mind. I'm not interested in having it be like a monastic tradition in that sense, because that you're basically a fighter who happens to also have mind powers, rather than
I would be that.
Rather than the closer to like a wizardly pursuit of psionics. So
Xavier Wolverine, does anybody see a problem with the power level of this character?
Well, I mean, you would I think have a loss of coolness potential when it comes to your level of power. But you could definitely do it. Why not? A monk that's psionically based, a warlock that's psionically based. Paladin is really easy to reskin as a psychic warrior. Really, you could make paladin a psychic warrior, monk like a monastic mind ninja, and
monastic mind ninja. Is that canon? That's in 5e monastic.
Sure. Yeah, monastic mind ninja. Why not?
Page 58, folks. Just flip it up.
And I mean, arcane tricks. Basically, anything that has magic power, you could really adjust it, or the Chi points work really well for that. For the purpose of kind of giving something to spend towards that.
And we have several different places comments are coming from here.
Yeah.
Axonar said, what about magical prejudice? This is something we could definitely hit on. I like this idea. Cleric Bob uses good magic, but psionics to Cleric Bob are the devil's work. They're evil. So, we could attack that. Another thing from Jandraline, Jan says magic gained through items throws another wrench in the works. When the person does not have the item, they don't have the ability other than trace residues that probably wouldn't be detectable by detect magic. That could be as simple to answer as saying, if you used a magic item in the last 24 hours, you're still glowing. You're still warm to the touch. Wah, 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 wah. So
that could be. You could do it that way. Especially if you've attuned to it. Like, you'd have to break attunement, I think, before you would not be and somehow influenced by it. Alex C, restricting a psionic to as an archetype. Yeah, I'm not interested. I'm just saying you could do that. I think it's really easy to make a psychic warrior out of a paladin. I would not be interested in doing that. I'd rather make a class that could include those things if you desire, or they could be, there's a class for psionics, and then you have archetypes underneath different classes that are basically already pre-made. One of the things I wanted to stay away from is I was reading somebody's nothing to hear here, folks. I was reading somebody's archetype, and it's like, where are they starting from? What class is this? Like, I have no, like, unless you see like it built from the ground up, just getting a fresh archetype that's not structured off anything is really hard to balance. So when I had to look at Mystic, I was like, this is cool and I like the direction they're going in, but how the heck do you see there and sit there and balance it against everything else? I'd personally rather take something known, something accepted as balance, and just switch out abilities and switch out structure until everything kind of lines up pretty together. I personally based my Psionics off of the Sorcerer and just changed things as needed. So I followed the Sorcerer progression, changed it to pool, which I feel changing it from sorcery points and spontaneous casting to a pool, which you can do in the, I think it's in a DMG. I don't know what page it is. But
Oh,
it's an optional
nerd
magic,
card.
optional magic rule stuff. You
Nerd
change
card,
it to,
please.
you change it to a pool. There's restrictions. You give up. You give up the ability to cast a lot of high level spells. You can cast like 1/6 through 9th level spell per day, but you've got a pool of power that you can slam out a whole bunch of first levels if you wanted to, a 5th, and a whole as many 5ths as you can slap in there if you wanted to, and not cast any 9th level spells if you were high level. So there's a lot of you basically giving up versatility for overall spellcasting power. So I think that's baked in, like that is baked in balance for going from a pool power. I mean, going to a pool power from spontaneous casting of sorcerers. So that was an easy switch. And then there's other little easy switches, and it's like, okay, each time there's still balance intact. But when you just start making abilities and slapping on saving throws and all this other kind of stuff, you're like, where the heck? How am I supposed to judge this against everything? But anyway, that's my little tear on balance issues with just throwing like, and that's what Mystic is. It's created by the people who created the rest of the game, but it is just kind of like out there. And I would rather do a mechanic. Everybody knows how it works. Everybody knows how it's balanced, and they can judge the class. They don't have to put their feelings into it. They can judge the class like, oh, I already think Sorcerer is balanced. I already think Druid's balanced. So this new Psionic class that resembles them enough that I can see where they're coming from with it is also balanced. Okay, off my soapbox.
No, it's totally okay. And it is a heated topic right now. If you guys dig around the internet at all, I have not seen many things get as much hate as a Mystic in a long time, except for maybe 4th edition. So it is definitely one of those things where properly balancing the character class. I also, just to touch on something you said, the concept of having properly balanced stuff in a game where players, this isn't necessarily something people always do. Doug, I like 4E. I know. There's at least like 2 other people on the planet that like it as well. So there.
I haven't played 4E, but I didn't hear it was super balanced, but I don't know. But that's another topic for another time.
Zankar said I said a dirty word. Did I actually say a dirty word? No.
I think they're messing with you.
Okay, all right.
Or you said like sludge or something like that. 4E is dirty. Oh, okay.
I was like, I've never said a dirty word.
Well, we know where you stand on 4E. I don't have an opinion on it. I just go with what I've heard. That's all I can say.
Well, all right. The conversation isn't about 4E or about ripping on the current version of the Psyonix. It's about how do these, but we could do it all night. How does Magic and Sanics interact with each other? We've already defined them as having a fully functional relationship. And yeah, that's my dog Peanut, and she just goes wherever she wants. I really don't have any choice in it. So if she's on stream, she's on stream. We need to decide once we go up from the village, which the village is if there's no exposure and the people are very ignorant or just very secluded from the rest of the world, then the reaction can be very extreme. To a medium-sized town, city kind of thing. Okay,
so medium-sized town, city kind of thing. I would say that's going to be more. There's an established. There's an established kind of understanding of magic. People have probably seen wizards. They've seen other people do magical things. It's more known. It's accepted. So you've got this more open-mindedness for a large town heading towards like city size, especially because they've got more strangers come in. It's not like close-knit people that have not traveled like 5 miles from their home and that's it. Like if you've only traveled to the village center because you live on a farmhouse someplace, then you're not well traveled when it comes to seeing the wide world. But I think a town heading towards city size, they're going to have interacted with many different types of people. So you're going to have less of that chance that you're going to have a whole group of ignorant townsfolk get on you about you having a book or, I don't know, a skull cap with arcane runes on it or something, or a glowy staff, or mind powers that you can fly. They'll probably think, wow, that's amazing. as long as he's a nice guy, I'll be fine.
Yeah, not to say that you couldn't, when telling your own story, of course, be like, it's a large town and, you know, they are going to put you in the stocks if they figure it out or whatever. Like, certainly something like that could still take place, but I would think it would be significantly less likely.
Well, you can you could have prejudice. There's a difference. I guess there's a difference between action based on ignorance or not, not having the understanding for it, and then a prejudice against magic and psionics. So if you specifically have people that are informed enough to say, yes, I've seen this before and I don't like it.
Conan the Barbarian.
Any of it, actually. Well, I feel like sorcerers, I feel like the magic users in Conan the Barbarian were pretty much like villains. Like, you were not a good person if you were doing sorcery.
Except his friend he met on the beach. But even that guy was a necromancer, basically. I mean, So
necromancers are people too.
No.
They love people beyond the grave.
So Skellington Jr. on Twitch says, do you think Psyonix will lead to Dark Sun books in the future? Gotta hope so.
Here's to hoping.
Yeah. He really wants to be a bug.
I have a lot of feelings about Dark Sun and Psyonix. Like, Psyonix was my first book I ever bought for D&D, second edition Psyonix. And Dark Sun might have been the first real big campaign I played in after my crazy campaign where I was a dark elf, mage, Psyonix's cleric. You know, oh my gosh, that was a crazy town. That was my first character that I made pretty much for a game. And after that, I actually played in Dark Sun and with Sonic stuff. So it was a lot of fun. And so I've got a big interest in seeing Dark Sun happen, but at the same time, it's like I want Psyonix to be good. It's like, get Psyonix, great, and then roll Dark Sun out with it. Or Eberron. They could roll out Eberron if they wanted to do that one first.
So James Leslie says, towns and cities, you'd see more magic on magic hate. The divine would try and convince others that arcane and psionics were the work of non-believers and should be hunted, and rangers and druids are heathens. And I think that would definitely be taking a very European perspective on how people would interact with
that. That would be a hard line, like taking a turn for, well, you know what? No, it's more of you've got a hierarchy forming of all these different groups in a town or a small city, and they're all vying for political power. Like, you start to have villages don't have much politics in the sense of many groups. It's all kind of like it's more like, it's almost tribal in the sense it's the village versus the outsiders and stuff. And you've got some hierarchy forming, and you've got favorites in that. But I think town and cities is where you start to get the fight can be real. Like, you could have a group of people all try and oust others as, you know, devil summoners or something, or people who enslave others' minds. You know, like if there's a big religious order and a mage tower in a town, and a group of Psyonicists roll in and be like, oh, we wanted to set up a guild here or something, or a school or a monastic hall or something here. Or we want that mountain peak over there that no one's using to build our stuff. Hey, we just want to get a permit. We want everything to be legit. And the religious order and the mage tower are like, hey, you know, we're usually fighting each other, but we got to get this guy out of here. These guys, they're no good. We've got to convince everybody that these guys are no good, because it's comfortable having the dual system of the wizards vying for power with maybe the mayor or the baron or whoever is in charge, and the religious order having their say in society. But then you've got this third group, they're the wild card. You don't know how they're going to interact. And the two powers that be that have magic might say to themselves, we would rather not have you here than try and use you for our own devices, because you're still a wild card. We don't know enough about you. So they may vie for kicking that group out or not allowing them in and oppressing them, rather than say, okay, join the party and see where you'd fall into the dominance hierarchy.
I completely agree. I think it would be very similar to like a medieval or Renaissance kind of guild situation where there's already a multitude of guilds, and the guilds are like, we don't want to give up money that customers will spend on us to you. So Nerditor Doug, and if anyone is unfamiliar with who Nerditor Doug is, maybe some of you folks in Twitch chat, he is the editor from nerdarchy.com, where we put up a story every single day, right?
Oh, lots of stories.
Yeah.
Nerditor Doug will be able to tell you, but he makes the magic happen on nerdarchy.com.
Exactly. So we throw up a story like every single day, and
many writers.
Many, right? Especially lately, yeah, sometimes 2 a day.
He's like the master conjurer, leading the giant ritual that is all the writing and words that come together to form articles.
The circus of chaos. He is running it. He did have a comment. He said, "I'm not really cottoning, not really jiving with the idea that there's much of a difference in execution or how the average fantasy inhabitant would view it. Like I'm Billy Bob and you're Joe Bob, and we've been brothers all our lives. It's kind of what happens when you're brothers, Billy Bob and Joe Bob. And so and so we clearly don't know the difference. Why would we know the difference? So I kind of agree with that most people would have no concept of the difference other than a cleric from the church telling them something different, or you know what I mean?
Well, the people that you allow yourself to be beholden to are able to influence you. So it's really like their opinions can become your opinions rather rapidly, especially if they have no counterpoint. So if there was that kind of dominance fight between whether the wizards are the tower is influencing the majority of the people, or the religious order is influencing the majority of the people, maybe they want different things, but they're still going to have that kind of, there's going to be places where they butt heads in politics. They're still going to be able to easily push out a third party that comes in that people might not know enough about. Again, because they're going to inform their people about it. I mean, if you're an apprentice wizard, or you want to become an apprentice wizard, do you want to have that monastic Sonic order come in and say, oh yeah, they're my buddies, but I still want to get into the tower? Be like, no.
Well, there's also, it's very important to point out that while we are doing a lot of great, broad, sweeping generalizations, there is always going to be power players and granularity and nuances to the relationships, even in a small town, that is going to strain different kinds of relationships between clerics and spellcasters and everyone else. Game of Thrones would be a great reference for that. There's always different people manipulating each other in any given situation. So,
I'm just saying this could be the mindset. It does not have to be. Similarly, there doesn't have to be a tower of wizards controlling or being like top in a region, nor a religion that's top in the region. So,
Old Grumpy said dwarf guilds call dibs on all the mountains. You still have access to all the mountains, Old Grumpy. They're all yours. If Psionics and Magic have existed for about the same amount of time, they'd come to an equilibrium. If one is new, then the established power would try to squash the newcomer. I feel like, while I don't completely agree with you, Ranger Roy, I feel like that is something that could be addressed, though, and we could take that perspective on it. We could say, who's new to the game? For instance, what do elves practice? Because in most of these settings, the elves and dwarves were around first.
Yeah, and the elves are almost always magic.
Right. I mean, so if we go with the classical,
their origins are from the Feywild, so you've got magic ancestry there.
Right. So if we use the classic perspective, we say elves were here first, they brought magic to the table, psionics is a later development, then it would lend to the idea that psionicists would be persecuted, but in a limited sense. Not in general, but by organized groups of spellcasters.
I like Dungeon Master take on it. Sonic power waxes and wanes depending on the amount of far realm infestation. Arcane magic is constant. In his world, it says anyway. So I like that idea that maybe there could be a millennia where that goes by and Psyonix is kind of distance in a way, because of there's not a lot of influence. Maybe there's a monastic order every once in a while, or there's a religious sect that practice mind magic, and that's it. There's two of them for 1,000 years, and then bam, like people start sprouting out of all different kinds of situations that have psionic powers without much training. So they have it, what I say, the folk hero superhero origin story, where it's like, oh, an ogre was killing everybody in the village, and I just lit him on fire with my mind powers that I never did before. It was great.
That is amazing. Good job killing the ogre.
Yeah. So then you become the folk hero, and you go off to do your mind powers elsewhere and become an adventurer.
James Leslie says, I think it's how magic is presented. A person that walks through and heals a plagued person, they'd be a savior. And in some instances, I would agree with you. Crazy Myrna, I'm seeing like this scraggly-haired old woman who reads chicken bones and has a cat, is a witch and burned.
I see like the female version of Radagast the Brown.
Mine was straight to Ogda from Dark Crystal. Rumbling, hiding shadow. Yeah. But Dungeon Master, you did like immediately spark the imagination with that comment. I immediately went to, what if magic isn't consistent? So anyway.
So it could also be culturally. So let's say there's people from the north. They live in the mountains. They live in a cold region. And they developed the ability to psychically warm the area so that they don't die of frostbite every winter, and they just stay up in the mountains. And over the decades and century or whatever, they become practically like a split. There's like a total split between the people practicing this mind magic that keeps them warm in the bad climate, and then the people in the valley. So the people in the valley, maybe they had started a fight for some reason. They either the north raids them, or the southern valley just wants metal from the region and starts fight with them. So they start fights for whatever reason. So they become hostile towards each other. So then you have this valley region that's like, well, you know what? We don't let psionic people in because the guys in the north that do psionics, they're bad for us. Like, and it is totally just the perspective of the people in that valley are like, we're at war with them. They steal our resources, or they greedily hold the minerals that we need to survive as a town from us. So they're at war. So basically they don't want you to add to the Psionicist might. So you're not allowed to go there if you have powers, or you're not allowed to even go. Like the valley will be like, you're not wanted here. You remind us too much of those people we hate. And they hate them for good reasons, because they've been warring for 100 years, and they all have a distinct feature. They have this ability to keep themselves warm as well as develop other mind powers.
Raven Thylacine said magic and psionic purges sound fun. I will totally throw this out there. The background for me, my perspective on all of this is I want crazy evil demon dogs that smell magic on the ends of leashes, and murdery evil inquisitors everywhere, and psionics police and mage police. Like, I super love the darker, grittier side of this. Dark Sun had that, where magic was illegal, and you'd do your I'm a mage symbol to other magic users. So go ahead.
Good point about the magic being illegal. There was two reasons for that. First off, people didn't like magic because defilers screwed everything up. But even if you were a preserver, the people in charge who actually had magic did not want competition. They did not want it out of their control. So they literally had like totalitarian states, individual city-states, where they just controlled the flow and who had access to supernatural powers. The one difficulty was dealing with psionics, but you couldn't become a dragon without being a mage and a psionicist. So it came down to you weren't the Dragon of Tears competition. You were not his competition if you were just a psionicist, because he's like, so what? I can do 9th level spells, 10th level magic, so they don't want people getting to that level. So they would just quash anybody that wasn't. So that's how you get the underground magic users and stuff. And that isn't like that's the populace informing how they're going to treat magic users in general, because everybody's like, oh, defilers destroyed the world. And then there's also the top down edict of, I don't want anybody to challenge me in power, so no magic.
Precisely. Yeah.
So that's two types of, like, you got the social control going on, and then you have the empire control going on.
Old Grumpy in Twitch said, so is this for a new game you might be thinking of making up? I'm not doing any game design here.
I'm always designing stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm always thinking about products and things. So that stuff comes up. But right now I'm just kind of hashing out this kind of concept in my mind. So
my goal here is to start some really solid arguments with Nate. And then kind of as a community discuss how I guess all of us think these things would interplay, kind of really think these ideas through, because many times some of these concepts get glazed over and they just say, well, it works. And for me, I find it really stimulating to go, no, it doesn't just work. This is how it works. So
Axoneer, the Sonic Inquisitors could be like the floating guys from Dark City. Oh yes.
That is mildly disturbing, a little scary.
Yes. Fantastic. I love it.
Wow, fell hunters. Something like a fell hunter. Not exactly. Those are quite zergy looking and a little scary looking. I would think just like a large mastiff that's hairless, has skin like a rhino, like the big calloused skin, maybe purple colored or something with flaming eyes. Yeah. See one of those hanging out in an alley. What's going on, guys? You didn't cast any spells today? Okay, just keep walking. Okay.
And another thing for Empire, let's say you're trying to have a monopoly on magic or psionics, you would have to develop some kind of test or have some kind of laws that require people that show promise to be sent to a city or the Empire's hub or whatever for some kind of testing. I don't know, it's like a lot of the way animes and manga start is this kind of like, oh, we have to go off to the main city to get invited to whether or not we're going to go into the mage guild, or whether or not we're going to be sent to the monastery or something, or whether or not we're going to be sent home and say we're talentless punks who just need to go till the fields.
And I'm super into your direction for this, Elfbait. I think because whenever I work on stuff like that, I always go, this culture or this region or this kingdom lives this way. And then when I go to another region that is culturally different, I just start the whole process over again. But I would definitely say there's some dark, sinister king somewhere. Elfbait's group of robed individuals come to a village. Your son or daughter, whichever one it is, shows great potential. We have a test. And then, we have to, honey, they're here to administer the test to our son. Put your hand in the box. So, yeah. Yeah.
And if it's super dark, the box will chop your hand off if you're a magic user. If they don't want you around, because then you can't do magic with the hand and stuff. That would be terrible. Yeah, but if it detected magic in some way or potential, then it's like, okay, you're coming with us right now, and you're just going to get in the back of the wagon, and we're going to take you along the ride until we're done all the villages, and then we're going back to the capital.
Exactly, and the king would be like, why waste perfectly good, super powerful warriors? Let's just get them while they're young. I'll send out an inquisitor with a dog and a wagon, and we'll round up the army we'll have 10 years from now.
And you know what? That might be a city-state. Like if you're kind of not towards the level of empire, that might be the city-state that founds an empire, because they've gathered all the magical might that would have been diffused or never learned how to cast magic at that level. You're just suddenly like honing the edges on all of that potential, so that you're going to have basically a 10,000 man army made up of 50 individuals who can all cast at least a first level spell, and some of them are going to be higher level spelled, and you're who cares about archers? You're like laying low entire groups of people that you fight, and at that point you just start fights. You're like, that guy said something nasty about my wife or children, and they also threatened to annex this land that always belonged to us. And I think that's wrong. Everybody around me, do you also think that's wrong? Oh, heck yeah, we do. Let's go take it back. That's our ancestral land.
Yeah.
And you take it back, whether or not it was actually true. And you write the history books, so it was.
Well, the victor always writes the history books.
And so was the founding of the empire.
Yeah. James Leslie said, I see a lot of Gith-Yankee hit squads forming up in coming games. Yeah. And Elfbait, I think we may be mentally linked right now. He said, Gah! What if the Psyhounds were degenerate Gith? Oh, I lost it. The comments moved. What if the Psyhounds were degenerate Gith that lopped around on all four on the ends of leashes? I smell him, master. Good boy.
Oh.
That's.
I like the cranium rat, the dog-sized cranium rats. I like that one.
That would depend on the king, though. Exactly why I was saying like cultural differences or kingdom differences, because if the king is a wizard, he could be looking for the strongest for an heir or killing them to protect his throne. Exactly, the number of directions you can attack this from is really like limitless, and that's why I love to write completely cultural worlds. When I do world building, I say an area the size of Texas, I world build for that area. Then I go to the next area and it's a whole new thing because I want to create that divergence, and then that intermixing those two areas, how they connect to each other and how those two cultures interact kind of tells its own story at that point.
I agree. And it's also, you can have it as the major backdrop of your world and how it works, or you can have it as the major plot device. So if the big bad is the emperor. If he's oppressing everybody, conquering places, and you start maybe in a neighboring kingdom that is being attacked, and you've got to deal with how the empire and the people of the empire view what you are and what you're doing, as well as what they'll do if they capture you. They may capture you and try and re-educate you. They may capture and put you on some kind of geese or something.
Re-educate. That is a terrifying term.
Yeah, well, when you do it with mind magic and stuff, yeah, I would say so. Pretty nasty. It's one thing when they try and shove propaganda down your throat. It's another thing when they actually have ways of rewriting your memories.
Dungeon Master brings up the leashed guys from the Chronicles of Riddick movie. Those were really creepy and cool with the giant lens. Yeah.
What Ranger Roy question? Are you going for dark fantasy or vanilla fantasy? I would say it's going to be kind of which way do you want it? Do you want to do it where it could become really dark? And are you going to be the heroes that like light up the world again? So if you've got an encroaching side kingdom, what you didn't like? What's what? So
comments coming in.
So if you're doing that backdrop about there's somebody trying to form an empire, and people are prospering in it, but they are going around defeating other nations and absorbing them into some kind of like giant global or continental power, and you don't want to be dealing with that. Basically, it's like going to impinge on your rights and abilities that you have currently in your kingdom. Then that can be you can deal with that diplomatically. You can deal with that. Maybe you have to show a strong enough front for your kingdom. Maybe that's one of your tasks, is to disrupt what the empire or the to-be empire is doing enough that they kind of question whether or not they need to stop for right now. And then that way you can get like some breathing room for then doing later quests for things, and maybe eventually being in contact with or talking with or dealing, strategic blows against the empire that you're fighting against. So that can be a backdrop, and in that sense, that's like kind of like, I want to say glamorous war, but it's more of like freedom fighters war kind of thing. That's not really super dark because it's not tyrannical yet. So you can either start in like dystopian kind of tyranny, where the empire, you're in the empire, you've been absorbed into the empire, and you've got to deal with all these harsh laws, or you can deal with the like there's still hope for the future because we're not in that terrible future yet.
We have 2 points of attack, and Ranger Roy, you bring up an excellent point. Dark fantasy. I'd look to Warhammer Fantasy for inspiration. There are tons of things about Warhammer Fantasy I adore, and a bunch of stuff that I could live without. Zankar on Twitch said you could have illithid Inquisitors patrolling with Intellect Devourer dogs. Only if everybody starts the game at like level 9 or 10 or something. That is a mess if you're low level. Can we just run? I don't want to be in this town. I'll shop somewhere else.
I just want to keep running. In fact, I want to run till I'm almost dead from exhaustion run.
Exactly. The other thing that's brought up, James Leslie said dwarves forging iron golems to put down the wizard uprising. He does bring up the fact that we have not addressed what do the elves think, what do the dwarves think, what do the gnomes think.
Yes.
So
I was going for the idea that if you had a mostly human town or a mostly human, just kind of dealing with not necessarily bringing any of the fantasy races into it, just kind of saying in general this is the direction I'd go. But once you start going with what you have culturally as your dwarves or what you have culturally as your elves, they're going to come from specific directions on this. And I would think that unless you've got a really, really hardline elves, you're going to have pretty open, I think, to magic powers in general. There might be a split between Psyonix okay? That could be something where maybe it's the opinion of elves that it distorts the minds and makes them too of something, like too one way or the other as far as like elfishness is concerned.
Elfishness. Scientific term.
Yeah.
Heard it here first.
Truthiness is high with that.
TM.
And you could say the same thing with dwarves, that they've got a particular direction they're coming from, really structured and lawful, and they're going to. I think they would like Psyonix personally.
My perspective. So when I use dwarves in any campaign setting, dwarves can't use magic, and dwarves don't like magic.
Oh, that's what you normally do?
That's my normal perspective. Dwarves don't like magic at all. They can't use it, but they're resistant to it.
Darkness, thanks for the follow.
All the love.
So you go with the old school. Dwarves aren't wizards.
Yeah, dwarves are not wizards. It's preposterous. It's ridiculous. So that's my own perspective. I also don't ascribe to every elf has some level of inherent magic to them. Like for my settings, elves aren't fae. I don't do that. Elves are just another species. Dwarves are just another species. They're people. And they don't live for thousands of years. Maybe they'll live for 200 or 300 years, but they don't just live forever. So they're not like, I don't know. Fae to me implies some form of magic, and the elves don't have any kind of magic. They're more of a what would you call that? They're just a biological construct. They're like a person, like a human.
I'm sorry, you said faes, elves don't have magic. I just erased that from my mind. I'm of the opinion that elves are most certainly magical fae creatures. They're more earthy, crunchy than the fae lords of the wilds.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say that I agree. I disagree with that, but that's just. I also am cool with dwarves using magic because I think they'd have their own kind of like wizardry. I think Dave's doing a really good job of having a dwarf wizard in his Ted's campaign.
James Leslie said, I expect dwarves would think Psyonix. Oh, was that a Queen reference, Doug? I expect dwarves would think Psyonix an aberration and would prefer to explore technology. High elves and drow would embrace the arcane as they live in realms and obtain 10th level magic. Gnomes would want everything because they're too curious. I've always loved the idea of tinker gnomes. Like, where's technology still progressing? the gnomes. That's where it's still progressing. So.
And I like the point Ranger Rorig brings up. Duergar probably hate Scions that aren't Duergar.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm like, they'd probably have like a ingrained cultural hate for mental control.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they're doing it, which then they're like, oh, more efficient slavery. Awesome. That's what they're saying to themselves.
Poor Durgar.
They're just okay. They're like the dog that's gotten beaten, and they hate everybody for it. Even if you're a nice person, they still hate you for
it. Doug said they hate everything. Cause yeah. Okay, so the next point of attack. We have to hit the next point of attack.
Good. I'm glad you wrote this down.
I did. I have it. It's all up here. So the next point of attack is, how are we going to organize this? Because every time you try and develop some kind of artificial structure like this for how the Inquisitors are organized or anything like that, there are limitations. And I would say that we need to mechanically, and this would be the police force or inquisitorial force or organizational system that we're using to funnel magic and psionics into a control of some kind. If you say we have dogs that can detect magic, then there's no magical creatures within 1,000 miles of the city. And there's no magic items within 1,000 miles of the city.
Because they'd be balkering all night otherwise.
Right. They'd just be exactly. So you have to kind of rein those things in. In one of the settings I wrote, and yeah, I do allow dwarves to be clerics. Dwarves are allowed to use clerical magic, and only because of R.A. Salvatore's book series, The Cleric Quintet, dwarves are also allowed to be druids because, oh my God, Pickle? He was adorable. I smiled every time Pickle talked. But we have to kind of control the reach of this. We don't want to generate a system that sounds good and then realize the implications of it are going to be really far reaching. So for me, I said, when you're born, one of the Inquisitors shows up, he touches you and essentially casts a spell on you that burns a rune into your skin. And if you ever cast a spell, it causes you a bunch of pain, and it kind of sets off essentially a homing beacon so the Inquisitors can come find you.
Man.
How would you attack this?
Okay, so we're talking about controlling magic.
Right. We're at the full blown, we're in a city, there's a creepy guy smoking on the street corner. He's an Inquisitor. He's got a big wide brim hat. I don't know. Maybe you have guns in your game. I don't. Flip
like
my
Vampire
pistol
Hunter
on the
D
side.
or something.
Right. Vampire Hunter D guy minus the talking hand that is, standing in the corner. And I don't think Vampire Hunter D smoked. This guy has terrible habit. Don't smoke, kids. So he's hanging out on the street corner and he can feel magical energy.
Okay.
If you give someone the ability to just flip the light switch and have detect magic 24/7, you have a ton of problems. It messes so many things up. Mm-hmm. So we'd have to rein it in and generate some kind of control. So I'm wondering, what would your perspective be on that?
Okay, I would rather dial it back and say that there are people that have like more magical detective or investigator. That's what I would go with. I would dial that back. Okay. And even if you had that ability, you would have magical creatures and problems because you can't be everywhere at once, nor can you influence everything at once.
Mm-hmm. The Inquisitors aren't Superman.
Especially if you do things like you're talking about the magic rune that hurts people when they cast magic and sets off a beacon. That would be convenient for paper trail kind of thing, like following people that do stuff. But do you have a way of reversing that? Because otherwise, how do you get magical Inquisitors? Do you know what I mean?
Well, that could be the thing where...
Are they immortal liches? That actually eat the magic people? Oh, man.
Immortal liches that... What?
You got to eat something.
Well, I was thinking there is the Emperor in Warhammer 40K, and they just feed that dude Psionics.
The God Emperor.
Yeah, exactly. Down with the false Emperor. So
Ordo Hereticus.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the idea of persecuting Psyonix, the first thing I think of is definitely Warhammer 40K. So,
where everything is bad and war happens all the time.
Exactly. Zankar said, I like the idea because then you can have an underground that can remove the rune for a price. You can join the resistance. In my setting, essentially you have the rune, and then if you want to, you can join for free the colleges that will teach you and become an inquisitor. So when you join the colleges that will teach you, they remove it for you.
But then you're kind of like beholden to the governmental forces or whatever, because you're training to be an inquisitor or something.
It works out so nicely, doesn't it? Oh, yes.
So you can be one of those like rogue guys that gets either your tattoo, let's say, removed or deactivated.
Right.
You just put some aloe vera on there.
Put a little little neosporin, it'll be fine.
Aloe vera, a little mushroom juice works out okay. It just calms it right down so it doesn't cause you a splitting headache. and then you could join the resistance, or you could go off and do some hedge wizardry while you're figuring out how to remove that mark or something.
Right.
Or you go off and say, hey, well, I know I've got magical abilities, so I'm going to go off because that scar where the thing it itches all the time. So maybe that's a sign that you're probably able to be a wizard or a sorcerer or something like that. So you're going to head off to the school and be like, all right, I'd rather have nice gainful employment, not be a farmer, and I'm okay with persecuting people because,
it's a big deal. It's like a college education.
Yeah,
like
for free.
It's a big deal for a lot of these people. Yeah, and it's for free.
Just rather than taking on tons of debt that you don't need, you instead take on the responsibility of being latched to the government forever.
Precisely. You are putting yourself in a prime position to be brainwashed, probably from a young age. And Dungeon Master, I'll always read Dark Crystal references. They drain magic from magic. I just love that movie. They drain magic from magic users to fuel their technology and boost their lifespan, like the pod people in the Dark Crystal. There are actually a ton of games, stories, movies that reference the concept of draining magic users and reusing their energy. I have played with that so many times. I had a god emperor that just ate magic power, and so he had all these hoses hooked up to him, and there was essentially a floating pedestal behind him with a big glass tube, and there's just some poor schmo in there that's having the energy sucked out of him, and he's just chilling out talking to the players with this dude writhing in a tank behind him. But yeah. That's a really common theme, and I like it because it's kind of dark and wicked. But yeah.
And to me, you don't have to make something kind of crazy. You can just make I would say that's just a special type of lich or a special type of vampire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And James Leslie brings up the arcane vampires that drain the magical energies from people. So
yeah, heyday if they got into that college. None of you know how to cast spells, but you're all spellcasters.
Maybe it's like the Githyanki Lich Queen that offs you once you get to a certain level so that you can't challenge her. So it's basically like once you retire from the Magical Inquisitor School, and then you serve the God Emperor for a little bit, and then off you go into retirement. Tahiti, it's a magical place, except it's not. It's terrible, and you die.
We put you in a kill box. I mean, we send you to a beautiful garden of wonder.
Yes, it's in this box.
Why'd I say that? So my approach is always like the magical college. I definitely go with kind of a darker perspective on how I set up my fantasy settings.
Well, that's what your focus is. Like that is a problem with the world that the player characters can seek to remedy.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it is like fighting against a mountain, that can be something they desire, or that's in their backstory. Like, oh, my sister was taken and I haven't seen her since she was 10, or like that can be or you yourself are escaped person from that situation, or you're in this town, which is 500 miles away from your hometown, because you had to escape because you cast a spell over there. You know, like there's all these backgrounds that can be interwoven into this is a bad place. This is a bad, like, future that we don't want to have get any worse. I mean, we don't want the future to get any worse than it already is. In fact, we might want to reverse it, and that can be like a major plot driving point.
Dungeon Master said something, and Doug, if you're still hanging out in chat, you can answer this for me. Airships with a desiccated dude strapped to the prow, and then, you know, he dies and they find a new battery. But I think that's Life Jammers from Spelljammer.
Yeah, that reminds me of the life jamming helms from Spelljammer.
Yeah, I think that's like a thing D&D did at one point, where literally they were like, throw Bob in the seat and he'd just have the life sucked out of him to get the boat to move. Life Jammer. Yeah, it is. Okay, thanks, dude.
The Gloshi or whatever, the spidery alien people use that. Because they're slavers, so they just stick people in it. And then when you're done, out you go.
Yeah, terrifying.
James Leslie. Oh, you learned Firestorm, Timmy. Great. We're moving you to new quarters through this door. What? The red stuff on the door? It's just paint. Only paint.
Yeah. Dark. Really grim future. Yeah, Neogi. And the Illithid did that as well, yeah. The Neogi were awesome. I hope to never run into them again. List of things that I find terrifying in D&D. Bugs, Neogi.
Oh, that could be an interesting spin on something like Eberron. Axoneer is you could go to Matrix route. Magic users are gathered up and hooked into magic power plants to provide magical benefits to a population. That'd be an interesting way that Eberron worked. Be like,
I'm going to be totally honest. Was it Final Fantasy 4? 4? That's 4. This is 5. I know the difference. 4
yeah,
was it my
I don't have them split like you do, I guess.
Final Fantasy, I have fins. Was it Final Fantasy 4 that had Magitech, that introduced the idea of Magitech, where they were like taking supernatural creatures from another realm and just sucking the energy out of them to use them?
I thought that was
Was it 3?
What about
somebody
the one
here
with Sephiroth
knows
in it?
One of you knows who wants a cookie. That's all I've got.
6 with the espers and tubes. Is that
yes.
Leslie?
Thank you, James Leslie. You're the bomb. Yeah. Was it? Did it do it in both
Smith
games?
3. I don't.
3, 6.
Okay, 6 in Japan, 3 in Super Nintendo.
Okay, I definitely played that on SNES, so that's where I ran into it. But okay, yeah, exactly. And that theme's been explored really well. And I have no problem with that theme, because you take the populace of magic wielders and instantly shrink it down. You just smush it, which also, in order to address that correctly, though, you have to go into, well, what do the elves think? What do the dwarves think? Because now you're talking about something that's going to directly affect them. How would an elven society feel if a human inquisitor, or perhaps an elven inquisitor, showed up and said, I know Nimrod can cast spells. Put him in the wagon.
He's coming with us.
Yeah. I mean, what would the elves do? Maybe the elves hate humans?
I think if 500 years ago, they tried this trick with the elves before, and then like, oh, well, you know, you're within our kingdom's bounds or the empire's land, so you're under our jurisdiction. It doesn't matter if you've been here for thousands of years off in your forest. We drew a border and you're in it. Yeah, so exactly. We have a flag, basically, and that's the way it's going to go. So you're going to have to follow these rules. By the way, like 15 of you have to come with us. Yeah, if they actually don't just kill those people on the spot,
yeah,
and they actually allow them, or there's a fight and they get taken, they're probably not going to like the group of people that take them. And if it's a mostly human culture and it's a mostly human empire, then they're going to have a dislike of humans in general, because you might be one of the empire. There are a couple different perspectives you could use on that and different directions you can go. And since we were talking about Final Fantasy 3/6, you could go with the elves are fey, ergo have magic. Dwarves are magic resistant, ergo have magic.
and maybe the I guess demi-human races or other races, maybe they're the ones that ended up in the vats. And then none of the humans mind. They're like, oh yes, of course, it's an elf. We put all those guys in the vats back there. That's how my blender works. Like, what are you giggling about?
Stick them in the magic goo and it powers the city.
Well, if you throw them into the vats and stick a hose down their throat or whatever, like the Matrix, then certainly you could sap them for energy. Elven magic is like high octane.
Elves are now almost extinct.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm going with.
That could be the way you get into the future that is, elves are changed or not there. Maybe they've lost. Maybe the only elves that continue on the race are non-magic users. So you've got, that's how you could transition, I guess, from high magic elves to not really any magic at all type of elves, is they're the ones that were left to have children and continue on with the species.
To propagate the species and then maybe dwarves got off scot-free. Maybe the Dwarven Society grew and got really big. They gave the secret of steel. Maybe they gave the secret of steel to the humans. I'm
not feeling that accent. But I got it. You were trying to be a gruff dwarf. I got it.
All right.
A for effort. If it's not Scottish, it's crap. What was that from? I don't remember. I think it was a Saturday Night Live skit, but it was humorous. Yeah, and if they didn't, then the hell with them.
Xankar dwarves are 120 volt. Elves are 240 volt. Depends on the day. If the elf had a good lunch, you can get a full 240 volts out of him.
For at least 6
they're
hours.
More like a capacitor. They just dump all the energy at once. Not as good as a dwarf. Dwarf really lasts. He's like a Duracell. So, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Ranger Roy got it. It's the riddle of steel.
Okay.
Kron will ask me the riddle of steel. And if I don't answer, he will throw me out of Valhalla. Yeah.
Got it. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we think we've covered terrible futures enough and terrible places. So how could this magic stuff happen, be regulated, and be a happy place where sunshine and ponies prance and things? Because it's been a little too dark.
Sunshine and ponies. Sunshine's nice. Ponies are okay if they're carrying my stuff. Okay, all right.
Donkeys.
Okay.
All right.
Donkey.
So I'm going to say that, let's say magic is in the world. People don't freak out about it. So let's go with that angle.
Okay.
And then it's spread out enough that you'd have to have this really overarching terribleness to really get a power grab on them. And no one's done it. Because anytime someone tries to, there's other things in the world, such as barons, other people, groups of people with
He-Man.
Who have enough power. It could be a He-Man.
You said sunshine and ponies.
That reminds me of a really old video. But anyway, so you've got all these things happening, and you say to yourself, all right, no one becomes a totalitarian dictator. No one's doing this nastiness. There's no magical inquisitors. It's just people doing their thing. Magic is kind of usable. Psyonix is kind of usable. Clerics are doing their thing. And they're just not causing a terrible dystopian future to happen. You can still have political intrigue. You can still have power grabs. And you can still have all that stuff. But basically, let's dial it back to not totalitarian state.
Okay. I think I can handle this. I think we can do that. All right. So what if you use an overwhelming, so we don't have to do the fluffy unicorn thing because I just ate. I don't want to barf. So we don't have to do the fluffy unicorn thing. What if we did a super neutral party?
Okay.
So there are storylines, video games, movies, all kinds of stuff that have the ultimate power of neutral, essentially. And it takes different forms in different settings. But essentially, it says, I'm not going to let evil get super powerful. I'm not going to let good get super powerful. I'm going to maintain the balance. I don't step in unless I think the balance is going to be messed up. So you can kind of get your fluffy bunny universe there with our super neutral entity. But what it is, a group of druids, a god.
I kind of that makes me feel like a lot of Dragonlance happening, but that's just my impression of the good and evil dragon fights.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather say everybody is really proficient at being crappy, so I would think that if someone tries to have some kind of neutrality, you're going to end up with crap. That's my opinion on the Megaverse balance of the universe, good and evil thing. People are evil just fine on their own, left to their own devices. So for it to be tilted a little towards good, you're going to have people pushing more towards that angle and quashing things that get out of line. So basically, evil Necromancer shows up and he's like, I want to either turn you all into zombies or my Necromancer minions that are going to go off and be Necromancers and do bad things. You'd be like, oh, heck no. Get the paladins on this. We're going to make a call out for them, and they're going to come in and deal with it. So you've got Rage Warrior says the Circle of 8. That's a good reference for that. So I feel like if you had a normal adventuring kind of situation where you've got some adventurers, but there's a lot of regular old people, there's a lot of time and place for interesting stories to be told that aren't super overarching, like heading towards that dystopia that I'd like to stick away from for this section. But it's really hard because like, oh, there's so many good story arcs.
Well, okay. We can use some generic logic to try and win this battle. We are talking about magical regulation. Dylan Taylor asks, I just came in. What are they talking about? So the idea of controlling magic to some degree. Either super dark future Warhammer 40k, we melt all the Psyonicists in the Emperor oven,
Into an energy
or into an energy shake, or super fluffy bunny happy fun time, which is kind of what we're talking. We're done with the dark stuff. We're doing the fluffy bunny happy fun time stuff now.
I'm just saying, there can be like up and down, like small troughs, small crests.
Well, like I was saying, you can do a Zankar wants to know, why does the Necromancer have to be evil? Because they're all inherently evil, Zankar.
Foul magics. I do have, okay, if you're racing undead, I don't have all this strangeness attached to it, but I'd say it's super major bad taboo to raise someone's grandmom or dad that just died. Just no good feelings can come out of this.
That's pretty dark. That's a pretty messed up thing to do, bro. Put my grandma back.
Unless the culture as a whole is super into the idea of not wasting a thing. And at that point, letting a relative sit in the ground when they could basically have a new purpose, you'd have to have that bend to culture.
Or religious context.
Yeah, there'd have to be some kind of religious context, or there'd have to be just a cultural like zeitgeist towards this idea of, we don't like wasting resources, including if we can get people to move that are dead, they're going to take up the trash and they're going to clean the streets and do whatever else, or they're going to be army people so that we don't have to die in wars or defense. There are eternal sentinels. Even if it's just simply that, I could see you doing that and being what's considered a good necromancer. Because I don't have this hang up of making necromancy evil. It's already super taboo as it is because of just the general taboo against body stuff and using dead people that we have in, I think, almost every culture does not like make a staff out of their granddad's head. Like, I'm pretty sure almost 99%, I'm pretty sure we don't do that as humans. So
some cultures do. There are cultures that will preserve the dead and then bring the preserved person out for, say, a celebration, and they'll put food and wine in front of them.
Yeah, but that's
and
kind of like ancestral, like nodding your hat, like tipping the hat kind of thing too.
Precisely, but many of these settings are extrapolations on existing human norms or cultures. So maybe once a year, Grandma gets up and goes for a walk.
That could be a festival. Yes, that could be a
exactly.
cultural norm that happens. And in that case, you're not desecrating or anything. It's considered a good that happens.
Precisely, religious context or cultural context.
Yeah, like kind of like ancestral worship, ancestral involvement, necromancy. That's like Andrew Jackson Br. Day of the Dead, like
souped up version,
souped up necromantic version of Day of the Dead. We don't just dress up like the dead. The dead come out and dance with us.
Exactly,
Completely
and then
different.
I can definitely see you selling it. What if you bring back the dead to do good? Maybe bring back evil folk to redeem themselves. And honestly, most PC necromancers are raising their the foes their friends just killed. Yeah, this is true.
That would be really cool. And basically, if you're the only necromancer that's doing that, you're fighting against the ideas and thoughts about what a necromancer is culturally. You're doing that against the entirety of the world. In fact, you might seem a little crazy when it comes to how you think about stuff. I play a necromancer who is actually insane, and he's insane because of the way he views the world. He's not like crazy, like I'm chaotic neutral, so I do whatever I want. He's chaotic neutral because there is no good or evil. There is just simply his way of viewing the world. And his way of viewing the world doesn't include judgments of good or evil. There's just his family members that he wants to bring back to life, the people that he sees as being integral to his life. They've died, something's happened to them. He is going to gain the power to bring them back. Now, it is a mockery of life, but he doesn't view it as that because it's the closest, he's convinced himself, it's the closest thing he's going to get unless he becomes very powerful to the point where he can actually raise the dead back to life. But he doesn't, that's not where his skill set lies. So he's an unhinged person dealing with life the best way he can. So he's a broken individual. So as a necromancer, they can say, oh, he's evil because he's a necromancer. But in the end, those questions of good and evil are absolutely irrelevant. Not because he said, oh, well, I don't care if I do good or bad. No, because they don't exist to his understanding of what he's doing in the world. So they're completely irrelevant. And, you know, dead raised creatures to him are just a different form of life. That is the way he views necromancy. So in that case, like that type of, if that's the mindset of the entirety of the culture, then necromancy is not evil because of what you're doing with it and how it's going about.
Elfbait and Nemesis the Warlock both kind of hit on a relatively similar concept. Elfbait says, in times of need, all the past warriors of the land are called upon to defend the land. So the dead in a battlefield raise up, and maybe if you're going with a form of necromancy, because there's lots of interpretations, the form of necromancy where the soul returns to the body, perhaps the warriors return, and this is a thing for them. Like, this is a moment of honor that they were brought back, and they understand the desperation required to resurrect them and bring them back like this. So they know how desperate the situation is. Then Nemesis the
like
Warlock
visceral
says,
Valhalla there. It's like
exactly.
in your face. It's happening.
Exactly. This is like a big deal for them. They're like, oh my God, this is awesome. They brought me back. This must be important. I'm a true champion of my people that I would be brought back.
I am one of the chosen.
Precisely. Nemesis the Warlock, in Skyrim, they kind of guard their own tombs, but I never found out if it was an intended effect. I would say Skyrim's a very special case because you actually have two different interactions in that game. One with a god of light who you could easily say, you could argue with me that she's evil and I would not put up much of a fight, who has you kill someone to get a magic sword, Dawnbreaker, because that person is raising the dead and making zombies. So there's a goddess of light that tells you to do this, but the Norse people seem to think that the undead are okay in some situations and not okay in others. So I don't know. That's a mixed bag. I'd need like some lore in front of me to know for sure.
Nerdarchy Doug, I like the idea of getting necromancers to police the Psyonix because they don't have the minds to detect. So you could have like a literal skeleton crew that are like the Psyonix hunters.
Thanks for hanging out, Elfbait. I'll see you later, bro. I like the idea of we're completely off topic. We're on necromancers now, and we're supposed to be talking about
they're a sliver of wizards that usually get other wizards in trouble.
Yeah, we're supposed to be talking about like Rainbow Fun Time or whatever it is.
Oh man, we were supposed to be talking about it. It's so hard to be good.
Here's something I was thinking about earlier. Usually evil is a minority. Even historically, evil factions not always tend to be in the minority.
Overt evil is a minority.
Right. So if the bulk of the people are Harry Potter's Wizarding School of Magic, right? And then there is our evil minority out there, and we get that, and that's totally fine. And that could generate prejudices and biases out in society. Yep. Then we could do some kind of happy fluffy thing. I would definitely say good needs to be organized so that it's reasonable that they're able to fend off evil.
You're going to have to explain that again. Read chat, sorry. I was fishing in chat.
Okay. So, are you paying attention? Do I have eye contact right now? Stare deeply into my eye.
I mean...
Ow! Okay, so... Ranger Roy immediately said Hogwarts is an evil place. So if you
majority Harry Potter land, and then you've got like the Voldemort sect.
Right. So if we say that evil forces are generally speaking in a minority, then it makes it very easy to say the good guys who are the policing force, who are just Joe Schmoes like you and me, who normally do the right thing. It makes it very easy to say we have an organized, mostly good society. We don't need inquisitors, etc.
Okay, yeah, if it was mostly like that, but then you can say to yourself, well, there's people that just kind of like to goof off, or they're kind of like a little maverick. Sometimes they steal their dad's flying car, and it gets seen by people who aren't supposed to see it.
Oh God,
I think that happened.
Yes,
and you also have the idea you've got the three. In this is kind of very simplistic. I like that you brought this up. So you've got those three unforgivable curses. One of them is murdering somebody. One of them is torturing them. And what was the third one? Crud. I don't remember.
I don't know. The first two sound pretty bad. We'll just stick with that theme.
Oh, controlling someone's body against their will. So you've got those three. So bloodbending, yes. Terrible. So you've got these three things here, and that would be... those kind of twist you. So in that lore, it's like it's to do evil actually twists you towards evil. So it's like those spells not only have a legal definition within them, but actually committing them is like an evil act that kind of binds you more towards that side. So if you visualized, maybe killing somebody with magic in a regular D&D setting could be considered a problem because you're doing something very purposeful. I mean, it's like pretty premeditated. You don't just rage fireball somebody. You still got to go through. It's like I've decided to punching you out of anger, like reactionarily, like and casting a spell that nukes your house. Totally different levels of preparation and premeditation.
This dude's dead. Give me a minute. I need, what is that? Some beeswax and some ash.
So
You're
mad.
Toast, pal.
I'm so mad it's going down. Yeah, so I would think that's like a level of preparation that is beyond.
James Leslie just immediately said, you can rage fireball someone with a quicken spell.
You got me on that one.
I've done this. He ticked me off really bad. He was toast.
Be like,
ashes.
Quicken, boom. Yes, okay, so you could quicken fireball, I guess, in rage. Burn down the end, of course.
I like the concept of saying things went off the tracks mostly and kind of went towards the darker side. The reason I enjoy this is because it creates a really oppressive environment for players. When the players enter this oppressive environment, it's a scary place to be, especially if you're a spellcaster. And so immediately that starts to have an effect on how you act in that world. And if you know they're like, oh, I really want to go to the city because I need to get a new suit of armor. This last suit of armor, rust monster, it's ruined. But I kind of don't want to go there because it's just bad to be in the city if you're carrying a +1 sword or something, you know?
Nerd Stormtrooper argument, huh? They knew what they were doing? Okay. So this can be the nature and nurture argument a little bit. Let's say this. Okay, so you're naturally able to cast magic. What you do with it is would you consider the nurture part of that equation. But let's say when you're doing societal stuff, you can't just take into account, oh, well, you know, they were trained from birth to do XYZ thing, or they were influenced by this guy when they were teens, so they burned down a building with fireballs or burned the end or whatever, lit that old lady's cat on fire, whatever weird thing.
What the heck,
I don't
dude?
know, juvenile magic people. What would they
Leave
do?
your cat alone. So messed up. What's wrong with him?
He was always grumpy and scratched me. Fireball time. So you've got this kind of punitive stuff there. So I would think, like, I guess, like, kind of tie back into the magic law stuff. If you want a stable society, that's not a dystopian, terrible future. You're going to have to, I think, punish magic users more heavily for crimes they commit, because it's like we entrust you to walk around with explosives, and we trust you that you're not going to use them unless it's appropriate. So we let you roam free, just like everybody else in society, but you're held to a higher standard. You're basically punished harder when you do something with magic. I think that would just be the general way the world works in a place that wasn't some kind of crazy thing. The closest thing to sunshine and ponies and rainbows that you can get without having like a bland, boring, terrible place you don't even want to look at because it's like, oh God, grays, I'm done.
Well, I am a good guys always win kind of guy. I like fluffy, happy endings and mushy moments. That's me. But if it's for whatever reason, if I'm playing an RPG or a video game, I like a somewhat dark setting. So James Leslie brings up a really interesting idea. So with the argument that magic is premeditated, what about the effects of wild magic and them not being able to control it?
Well, I mean, do you become classified as a human-sized disaster? Like Vash the Stampede style? The humanoid typhoon? You know, so are you considered a danger to society at that point? Maybe there's a place for the criminally, magically insane, or the people that can't help themselves. And rather than kill them, they're imprisoned for their own safety and the safety of others. Simply because they can't handle what they're doing.
We're really entering into the Sith Jedi territory, because
I don't think if you're talking about the Jedi not as an absolute good, but as an organizational structure that tries to uphold order in society.
The Jedi are the police. The Sith are the bad guys. I mean, that really is kind of the direction we're going into, because we have people with great power. Some of them want to do things specifically for themselves. Other people want to do things to protect the greater good.
Okay, but you could also have there's great powers in the world. One of them's that wizard that has the tower in the city, and we let him have apprentices and choose people, but we really don't get in his way because we don't want to be on his bad side. We haven't seen it yet, and we're not interested in seeing it ever. So there can be that kind of like walking on eggshells around certain people in the society, because you know, hey, you just don't want to mess with them because you've seen them in a fight and the person he's fighting didn't make it.
Okay.
It was labeled self-defense and he got acquitted.
We don't have a ton of time left, but one last thing that's kind of out there compared to what we're normally talking to, which I like the idea of. Zankar says, to keep magic in check in cities or towns, you could have gloves or necklaces that magic users have to wear to block magic, just like the warrior's swords have to be tied into scabbards. So a mechanic or concept in which a mage can essentially sheath their weapon.
Like a peacetime tie kind of thing?
Precisely. Like Khan, peace tide. I can't even get it out of the scabbard anymore. So what about, or I think they call it peace bonding. Anyway, what about some form of mechanic, in-game mechanic, where an obvious method of disabling magic or psionics?
It could just simply be a bracelet you wear that makes you kind of a little tired all the time, because it's slowly just kind of ebbing away your magical focus. And to cast the magic, you'd have to break that off of you and toss it away. And maybe it's just it could be 11 herbs and spices soaked into a yarn string for all you know. It doesn't have to be like this magic item that we only have 10 of that we really don't want to be putting on all these guys. It can simply be like, oh, a while back some guy came up with a formula for how to deal with this increased population, and over time, rather than put drunk wizards in a magic cell until they cool off, we just have everybody wear this bracelet. And if something happens and your bracelet's broken, well, you better have a good excuse for why it's broken. If somebody just burnt down an inn or turned a guy into ash or something.
Yeah. For me, I immediately go to the dark side, and I imagine like the tattoo, the branding, the rune mark.
Yeah, but I don't think you need to go there for simply just trying to keep the peace. There's a difference between there's a difference between an injection. Oh. There's a difference between enforcing a peace that can never really exist, so you just go off the deep end trying to make it perfect, and having a give and take where there's still going to be some bad mojo going on out there, but you've gotten rid of the outliers, like the people that nuke a city, that kind of stuff. They're not just going to jump out and do that. That's going to be like they're going to be known quantity that are going to be able to be managed in some way.
So the concept of persecution of magic users and psionics is based on the fact that they have an ability that people who don't have it are scared of. Now, Axanar is talking about giving them all wizard hats.
You must wear the mark of a wizard. Gandalf hats for all. Or skull caps.
Ranger Roy said Iron Bands of Bolaro. We need them to still be able to walk and feed themselves, maybe use their hands. Magic use alters you. Prolonged use turns you into a tiefling. So if you use a lot, it's hard to hide because you have physical fiendish.
That would be like a corruption magic. That could be very interesting.
I'm feeling that is because like we were talking about with shape-shifting and magic use in general, physical observable results. I cast a spell, it leaves a ring of ash around me. I shape change, it leaves a big floppy husk on the ground or a pile of my clothing or whatever. Things that leave residue and have an effect on the real world.
I think if you're going to go for that angle, then you're going to go for the angle of magic is kind of bad for the world. And I think when you go for the kind of fluffy bunny pony stuff, you're going for a world in which magic exists, and just similarly to a sword, it can do bad things. But you deal with it's basically everybody knows.
What if I grow rainbow hair?
Everybody knows. Okay, the reason why we can all kind of hang out in a lecture hall, or we can all kind of walk down the street together, is because everybody knows the game we're playing. And I don't mean the RPG game. I mean like in real life society, everybody knows the rules pretty much. The people that ignore the rules, people that ignore the rules and don't break any laws, we are like, oh, that person's a jerk, that person's rude, I'm not going to talk to them, they're aggravating. The people that ignore the rules and also are breaking the law, well, we enact punitive things against them. Either it's fines, money damages, or some kind of they lose their time in society and they get put aside for a while. They get kicked from chat for however long. Those kind of things. Those are all. Yes. You have the idea is that's punitive to kind of inform everybody what the rules of society are. So if the rules of society are, we expect you to come into a town and not do anything, even if you've got really awesome sword skills. We don't expect you to brandish it browbeat everybody into submission and be like, I'm king of the sword people here, so now I'm in charge of the town. It's like, well, no, we either elected somebody, or a king put a baron in charge, and that baron selected one of his cousins, and the cousin's running the town, and that's the way the world works. And if you got a problem, try and start a revolution, and the entire world's going to fight you over it because they don't like the structure is how it is, and it works just
we
fine.
like things the way they are.
Yeah,
I have a beet farm. Leave my beet farm alone.
Yeah. I'm going to marry my daughter or my son off to the neighbor because we've been good friends for whoever how long, and we said, "Yep, sure."
Give me 2 cows for her. She's gone. I'm getting those cows.
And my son's gonna, have a whole bunch of kids, and they'll take over the farm, and I will smoke pipe weed and talk about the good old days while I watch them all work. When I'm old and gray and buried, and then I get buried in the ground, and that's the way the world works. And you come in here with your magic and try and say, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to take over this hierarchy." Everybody's going to be against it. So you've got to have this structured rules that everybody's going to follow towards an end. So if you have a lawful society, and it's not like kill or be killed dark drow elves, you're going to have...
Which is a messed up society.
Yes, which is a messed up society. You're going to have that kind of moving forward. Everybody knows what everybody else... The game that everybody's playing. We all follow these rules. You don't follow the rules, there may be punitive things against you. And if you're a magic user... Because your power level of damaging and destroying things is higher, basically how you can influence the world is higher, a magic user would be punished harder, I think.
So we're going with an organized, like Japan during the changeover, during its essential modernization or industrial revolution, when it was like, we don't need swords anymore. We're a city of laws, like Last Samurai-esque, kind of like you.
Melt your swords in or stick them up on the wall. You're not carrying them around.
Swords to plowshares. Okay.
Yes, but you can. It's the idea is you would still have your magic ability. You don't have some kind of binding agent against using it. But the idea is you will be punished if you do use it for illegal purposes. The end. And you know that going into a town. You know that going into a city. You can't just do whatever the heck you want because you got spooky powers.
A bunch of people mentioned different concepts for how magic would affect you and that it would leave some trace on you. You should know I'm writing that down and doing something as soon as the stream is over, because I absolutely love that idea. It having some kind of permanent effect on you. Like, people look at you and are like, yeah, that guy over in the corner with glowing eyes definitely cast at least one spell. I know he did. That's how you end up like that. So I don't know. I think I'm definitely going to do that.
All right. I think I'm done. I'm spent.
You done? You're spent?
Yes.
That's it. Game over.
Game over, man. Game over.
All right. Fire it up.
All right. I'm just going to give one last look. Let's see. I like Zankar, the idea of the druid or ranger using stuff that, maybe they grow horns or leafy hair. Arcane casters' eyes start to glow blue or purple. Divine casters glow gold or silver. That's kind of like a good... tell that something is going on that's otherworldly in nature.
Rifts.
Remember the guys with the silver masks from Rifts? They were villains forced to do good. The mask made them relive their sins. Maybe the good guys harnessed the bad to do good. That could be a possibility. Maybe that's their punitive. The punitive things is now we're going to use you. You have a service to provide that your magic level can deal with. Maybe you get conscripted into the army and you've got to be there for a year or several years, or heck, maybe if you do something really egregious, you're stuck in the army because there are people that can deal with you on a daily basis, and you're the battle mage for the rest of your life pretty much, or until you're allowed to retire. So there's an army is a very structured organization. That kind of strips you of a lot of rebellion, I think, in a lot of ways. It organizes you towards a specific direction. So that could be considered like punitive and also the penitential in the sense of, going back towards an organized society. Or you could escape and then become some kind of evil, tyrannous villain that people have to fight.
All the players I've ever had. Yeah.
There you go.
Power hungry. Just power hungry across the board.
So that's going to be it for our Magic, Psionic, and how it all works together discussion. And Let us know what you think in the comments below over on YouTube. You can also check us out on Twitch and Facebook if you'd like. And we also have this thing, nerdarchy.com, where we've been putting articles for a couple years now. And there is a lot of cool articles to read over there. And you can check out over our 2,500 videos over on YouTube. So we're all over the internet. Just type Nerdarchy into some kind of browser and you will find something of ours.
Jarvis. go Jeeves, whatever. Yeah, do those.
Yes. So until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.